Welcome to my channel. I'm Angela. Today we are making ciabatta bread. I'm having pork roast. I have pork roast, I should say, in the oven. It's Cuban pork roast. So tonight we're going to have it as a Cuban bowl. Rice, sweet potatoes, the Cuban marinated pork, some other, sides and toppings. And then what I like to do with the leftover pork is then in a couple of days, we're going to have a Cuban sandwich. And I absolutely love Cuban sandwiches on ciabatta bread. So I want to show you how I made it, but I need to give you a little heads up. I've made ciabatta bread just a couple of times. I think maybe 3 or 4 times in the past. And I thought I had this great idea to make things easier on me, and it was a complete flop, but I'm going to show you anyway for 2 reasons. One, just so you know not to do what I thought was my brainiac idea, and secondly, to show you that even though at one point in that process I thought for sure this wasn't going to work out, it did. I will say though, if you're familiar with what inside ciabatta bread usually looks like, it doesn't look like this. But guess what? I bet you it's still gonna taste fantastic. I bet you my family won't notice one lick of a difference. And I didn't have to break my Pantry challenge rules to go to the store for some ciabatta bread. So, and I didn't have to scratch it and start over because it is a little bit of a process. It's not difficult as long as you don't come up with new ways of trying to do something. So let me show you how I made these. And I will explain in that process what I did wrong so that you won't. Ciabatta bread can seem daunting if you look at all the steps that are involved. A lot of people might go, that looks difficult. It seems like you really have to have a technique. There's 4 ingredients. And yes, there are a couple steps involved. There is some technique to it, but I promise you it's incredibly simple. Salt, yeast, water, flour. That's all you need. A lot of rest time, and then you're going to do some stretch and folds, kind of like a sourdough, except of course this particular recipe is not sourdough. So ciabatta bread, if you're not familiar, has a nice crust. It's hearty on the outside. When you open it, it looks like it has, it's like aerated. There's those craters, if you will, on the inside. And the stretch and folds and rest period, while it's continuing to rise and not working that dough, is what creates that soft inside with those craters. And so it is very easy, and I'm going to show you how I make mine. The recipe I have is based off of weight rather than measurements. So all in all, when it comes to bread baking and just baking in general, the rule of thumb really is to weigh out your measurements. Now, there's a lot of times where I don't do that, which is, I think, why from time to time you have differences in the outcome on the same thing that you make all of the time. Your measurements aren't always exact. Weighing out your measurements are, though, rather than scooping and adding to. So let's bring you down and you can see how I am going to incorporate everything, what the dough is going to look like, and I'll explain how it should feel as well. The recipe I am making is double what the original recipe is calls for. So the recipe I will provide you down in the description box will be 1 recipe for 4 ciabatta rolls, essentially is what they are. I'm going to double it to make 8 because if I'm going to do this now, I might as well have a few extra to keep in my freezer. We're going to start with 240 grams of room temperature water. Okay, and I am doubling, so I have 480 grams of water. Two teaspoons of yeast, 300 grams of flour, okay, 600 grams since I'm doubling, and 2 teaspoons of salt as a double measurement. At this point, if you were making normal bread, it's very sticky. You would be inclined to add more flour. However, with ciabatta bread, we are not going to do that. This does need to be mixed more, but it is going to be a sticky and wet dough. I'm going to cover this and let it sit for 1 hour. So we can see that the dough has definitely rose. I don't know English as soon as I turn this camera on. It's definitely filled the bowl. We have a rise. And what we're going to do is, this is very sticky. We're not going to be able to work with it. Just like you would a sourdough, if you're unfamiliar with sourdough, we're gonna do a slap and fold, stretch and fold. One, you know, it could be called a few different things, and you're going to get your hands wet. This will help with the stickiness. And we're going to grab stretch and fold over. Get your hands wet again. Grab, stretch, and fold over. I will admit, I don't generally like to use this style bowl for things like this. I will generally use a bowl that has a wide bottom. This is wide on top, it tapers down a little bit. And I'm kind of now remembering why I don't like to do that. I can't really get underneath, but that's okay. We're gonna make it work. So I generally do it a total of 4 turns. And that's it. We're going to cover and rise 30 minutes. We're going to cover 30 minutes, come back and do the stretch and fold again. We're going to do this a total of 3 times. So this was number 1. We're going to cover it in 30 minutes, come back with wet hands, stretch, rotate, so on. Cover, rise, number 2. Come back, stretch, fold, do that a 3rd time. And then once we return after that 3rd rest, we'll move on to then officially the next step. So basically from here on is where you want to ignore what I am doing. What you should do is flour very generously your countertop. Turn your dough out onto the countertop. Shape your dough into a rectangular log type of a shape, and then go ahead and divide into the size buns or rolls that you wish. What I'm doing is what I thought I would do is save myself a step by not having to handle the rolls at a later time. I thought if I just shaped everything right here on my baking sheet and parchment paper, I'll do everything here and just throw them straight into the oven, and then I wouldn't have to transport them and potentially deflate and overwork the dough that I beautifully prepared. This dough was absolutely beautiful and is exactly the way it should be. However, I decided because of when I was working on this parchment paper, I didn't like the shape of some of my rolls, and I was afraid that the dough would burn up. And so I ended up reworking my dough and transporting it to a new cookie sheet, some new parchment paper here, which completely just defeated everything that I was attempting to do. Do you see how sticky this dough is? It is a nightmare to work with if you don't work with it properly. It should be on a very well floured surface. I've done this several times and it generally works out okay. This was just a hot mess, so don't do this. As you can see from the beginning of the video, it did turn out okay. We are going to eat these and enjoy these all the same. But I did want to show you sometimes, what are we doing here? We don't know. Sometimes we just kind of make things up and we go with it. So if you're going to give this recipe a try, definitely follow the instructions that I'm going to put down below in the description box with baking time and all of that. So I hope you do give it a try despite my little error here. They turned out wonderful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time I'm in my kitchen. Take care.